4. Conquered by Alexander the Great, the kingdom of Darius did not rebel against his successors after his death. Why not? Now that we have seen how difficult it is to hold on to recently acquired territory, some readers will be surprised to recall what happened when Alexander the Great conquered Asia in just a few years and then died very soon after his victory was complete. You would have thought the whole area would have rebelled, yet Alexander's successors held on to it, and the only trouble they had arose from their own personal ambitions and infighting. To explain this situation, let's start by remembering that all monarchies on record have been governed in one of two ways. Either by a king and the servants he appoints as ministers to run his kingdom, or by a king and a number of barons who are not appointed by the king, but hold their positions thanks to hereditary privilege. These barons have their own lands and their own subjects who recognize the barons as their masters and are naturally loyal to them. Where a state is governed by a king and his ministers, the king is more powerful since he is the only person in the state whom people recognize as superior. When they obey someone else, it is only because he is a minister or official, and they have to. When they obey someone else, it is only because he is a minister or official, and they have no special loyalty to him. Examples of these two forms of government in our own times are Turkey and France. The whole of Turkey is governed by one ruler, or sultan. Everyone serves him. He divides his realm into provinces, or sanjaks, and sends administrators to run them, appointing and dismissing them as he sees fit. The King of France, on the other hand, is surrounded by any number of barons whose rights date back to ancient times and who are acknowledged and loved by their subjects. Each baron has specific privileges, which a king can only take away at his peril. Looking at these two kinds of states, it is clear that Turkey is hard to conquer, but once conquered, very easy to hold. France, on the other hand, will be somewhat easier to conquer, but very hard to hold. The reason why it's hard to conquer a country like Turkey is that there are no barons to invite you in, and you can't expect anyone to make your invasion easier by rebelling against the king. This follows naturally from the situation as described above. Since all subjects are the king's servants and indebted to him, it's hard to corrupt them. And even assuming you do manage to bribe someone, he's not likely to be much help because he can't bring any local people along with him. This again for the reasons I've explained. So anyone attacking this kind of country has to reckon that he will find it united against him and hence has to rely on his own armed forces rather than any on mutiny in enemy ranks. But once you have won and routed the enemy and made sure he can't rebuild his armies, then the only thing to worry about is the king and his family. Eliminate them and no one else can threaten you since no one commands the loyalty of the people. Just as before, your victory couldn't look to any barons for help, so after it there are none around to pose a threat. The opposite is true in countries run along French lines. Here you can make inroads easily enough, winning the support of a baron or two. There's always someone unhappy with the king and eager for change. Then these people are well placed to get you a foothold in the country and help you to victory. But afterwards you're going to have all kinds of problems holding on to what you've won. Problems with the people who fought on your side and problems with those who fought against you and lost. This time it won't be enough to eliminate the king's family because there will always be barons ready to assume authority when circumstances swing their way. And since you can never give them everything they want and never eliminate them all, you'll lose territory. You'll look as soon as your enemies get an opportunity. You'll lose the territory you took as soon as your enemies get an opportunity to rebel. If we go back now to the kingdom of Darius, we'll find that it is one of Turkish variety. So Alexander first had to defeat its entire army and get control of the country. But once he had done that, and once Darius was dead, he was securely in command for the reasons cited above. And if his successors had been united, they could have run the region without any worries. In fact, the only trouble was the infighting they started themselves. But states organized the French way can never be held so easily. The frequent uprisings against Roman power in Spain, Gaul, and Greece, for example, were the result of these regions being internally divided into so many principalities. So long as people remembered their old loyalties to the local lords, Rome was never in complete control. But once the power and permanence of empire had extinguished those loyalties, then Rome became the undisputed master of the region. In fact, when the Romans started fighting among themselves, each warring commander was able to bring the province he was running into the conflict on his side. Since once the families of the old local rulers had been eliminated, the only authority people recognized was Rome's representative. When you take all of this into account, it's really not surprising how easy it was for Alexander to hold Asia, nor how hard it was for many others, Pyrrhus, for example, to hold on to the territories they took. It wasn't a question of the abilities of each particular governor, but of the different kinds of state they had invaded.